So I guess I can cut this out. But so, hi everyone, my name is Drake Brignac. I'm the president of Tiger Prison Project here at LSU. A couple of our other officers are also here this evening, and some of them will probably be filtering in. So Tiger Prison Project is a relatively new organization at LSU. We're in our second year. It was started last year by Emily Cannon and a handful of seniors who were in the Honors College or involved in HSS or criminology or different programs tied to issues related to poverty and social justice in Louisiana. Emily herself is a very big proponent of reform. She wants to go to law school. And so it was essentially created as a direct organization where students could interact with the fringes of the criminal justice system, you might say, in the sense of our slogan is educate, advocate, reform. And so what we try to do is achieve each through a unique means. So the education aspect comes through our general meetings, where we bring people like Mr. Davis this evening to come speak about issues. In the past, we've also had Chico Yancey, if y'all know that name. He's a representative for VOTE. We've also had Andrew Huntley from Parole Project and Carrie Myers. We've had judges from New Orleans. We've had local attorneys talk about immigration law, and essentially this kind of wide scope of issues so that students can engage in that kind of traditional academic environment. With the advocacy aspect, we work with local groups like the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison Reform Coalition and Voice of the Experienced, and just any sort of events that we can get our hands on. We try to stay engaged. And then the last one is Mobilize, which is service activities. Our largest that we've been able to maintain through the pandemic is with Parole Project. We do workshops at least once a month with their clients who are parolees, and we help them learn technology, how to navigate computers, build a resume, and we've also been trying to expand that into some more practical skills. And then most recently, we've done a few big events where with Louisiana Books to Prisoners, we tried to do a book drive to raise funds and books for their organization. And then this month, we're doing a fundraiser on behalf of Parole Project, where we're trying to collect household goods, because in about 2 months, they'll be having 2 clients who are graduating the program, you might say. So we're trying to prepare items for their homes. But I'm getting kind of into the weeds on it. But essentially, the goal is really, we want students to interact with the system, interact with people, and see a new perspective on it, that it's not just kind of what's built in the media, kind of maybe that residue of like the 80s and 90s, where, you know, you just see the negative side, you just see enforcement, realizing that, you know, people have humanity. There is a robust group of individuals who want to support them, and reform is tangible and within our hands, and it's just within reach as well. So that's a bit of it. I'm sure I've missed a couple of things. It seems to change every time, but I'll try to end it there and leave it up to you, Mr. Davis. But that's what we're. Oh,
I think you're muted.
Wait, Mr. Davis, I think you're muted.
I apologize. Wow. See, Zoom gets on my nerves, man. I hate Zoom. Don't you guys hate? No, I don't hate Zoom. This is beautiful technology. First of all, my name is Curtis Ray Davis II. I am the author of a book called Slave State, Evidence of Apartheid in America. It was basically written while I endured my 25-year, 9-month, 11-day sojourn in actual slave plantation. I was accused and convicted of second-degree murder in 1990. I was extradited from Compton, California, here to Louisiana, and sent back in history about maybe 200 years, and I found myself on a prison plantation, a real actual slave plantation called Louisiana State Penitentiary. historically, well, it's better known as Angola for any of you guys that are from here or maybe know its more infamous past. Angola is a country in Southern Africa where most of their products came from. Angola was originally a slave breeding plantation. They would take slaves from Africa, bring them to the Caribbean, and ship them to the United States of America via the Gulf of Mexico. And right there is the third largest port in the world. It's in New Orleans, Louisiana. The slave trade made its way up the Mississippi River, and one of the most significant plantations was Angola. This 18,000 acre prison farm now, penal colony now, but slave breeding plantation then, that was able to, 18,000 acres for perspective is about the size of Manhattan, New York, right? So this is a lot of space, a lot of evil that's going on. And historically, it was what made America great, according, to our leadership. The slave trade undergirded almost everything that went on in the South for a long time. And we're going to get into the historical timeline on what slavery really was about, how it still has very real significance and perfect present tense time, and why we have to work very, very hard to get the amendment to change the Louisiana Constitution, the federal constitution, and every individual state constitution in the United States that allows for legal human trafficking, legal forced labor, and legal slavery, which is legally called social death. My book is an important piece of work just because you need to try to, if you don't have my book, please go online, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, Target. My name is Curtis Ray Davis. The book is called Slave State: Evidence of Apartheid in America, and get an idea of what it means to actually go through that particular condition. The condition of slavery is a mental thing, and it's a state of mind, not just a geographical place. Okay, so we're here, and I am the public spokesperson for an organization called Decarcerate Louisiana. We started working about 3 years ago. This is a prison-led organization. Brothers in Angola prison, started in Angola prison, put together a plan to do what our forefathers were not able to do, and that was to limit the incentives, change the condition of prisons. I mean, right now prisons make money. It's not in the best interest of law enforcement to stop crime, because crime is something that benefits the economy. So we want to make a situation where there is no longer the incentive there, the money, the get rich quick scheme that could be sold on Wall Street. And we legally we're the only country in the world that actually legally has slavery. And we speak bad about the other countries, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, or whatever, but I would have rather go to trial in a third world country than in the state of Louisiana and spent so much of my life in prison for a crime that I didn't actually do, because there was such a big incentive on having people inside of these beds. All right, that said, before I go into our talk for tonight, I want to let you guys know that we are presenting a bill with Representative Edmund Jordan, and we are seeking to get a referendum that will allow us to take the exception clause out of the Louisiana Constitution. Slavery has been abolished except for people duly convicted of a crime. If you're duly convicted of a crime in the state of Louisiana and several other states in the United States, then you experience what's called social.
Other people on there? How
right?
you make your camera get other people?
Mr. Troy,
How you got
use your phone, please. James Troy. Okay. That said, I want to pull up a timeline. Drake, I don't know if I gave you the timeline, but I'm going to see whether or not they're going to allow me to share it. All right. The good people at Decarcerate Louisiana have taken a lot of time. We have volunteers, and we're going to later ask whether or not you guys want to get involved. The Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus has decided to support our bill that is coming up in this year's legislative session. We just want to put a red line through the exception of slavery. We don't want discrimination. We don't want forced labor. We don't want involuntary servitude. We want people to be able to actually live the lives that they're supposed to live. The vision of Decarcerate is really to change the way that people look at punishment in the United States of America. We want to start treating crime as a social disease instead of just having this lynch mob mentality. So let's go down the line for a second. And for those of you at LSU that are criminal justice majors or pre-law majors, this is very important to try to understand, because if you're on this particular Zoom cast, I think you're there because you think that you can change something, that you believe that the world can be a better place. And we believe that the profit incentive is cool. God's gonna bless you. You're still gonna get the Mercedes-Benz and the big house if you finish your college days, but everything cannot be based on the profit incentive. So I'm gonna take a step back through time and talk about the marginalization of Black people, how it happened, why it happened, and what we can do to actually change it. Chattel slavery started in 1619 and it lasted until 1865. Chattel slavery is a different type of slavery. You might hear your friends say, well, everybody on the planet Earth has been in some type of slavery. Every group, every culture, every ethnic body. That might be true, but the only group that were ever reduced to chattel in recorded history is the Black man and woman and child, right? Chattel means property. Chattel means property on a level that you're a dog, cat, cow, horse, buggy, or whatever, right? So chattel slavery only existed in the United States between the years of 1619 and 1865. This situation enriched several companies that exist today. People are living off the wealth that they had because my great, 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 great grandfather, from sun up to sundown every day, his life for free. He could not pass on a succession or a estate. No inheritance came. And what made this so bad was that even though other groups have been in slavery, they were never stripped of their culture, their God, their language, and any historical connection that would make them strong enough to last through whatever intellectual problems that might come. They have a doctor, her name is Dr. Joy DeGruy. She's been studying the effects of slavery and how it has a effect on African Americans, Black people in present modern day time. She calls the situation post-traumatic slave syndrome. post-traumatic slave syndrome. It's sort of PTSD. It's a situation where your mind is scattered, you're traumatized by a terroristic situation that happens over space and time through generations. Generations of our people have been treated in ways that animals aren't even treated. When you think about what was actually done to our mothers and our fathers and how that affect the rearing of the next generations, it shouldn't be hard for you to understand why we're in the negative social indicators on every aspect of life right now. Highest obesity rate, worst quality of life, highest illiteracy rate, highest everything that you can think of that's bad. African Americans now outdo everybody at that. So the original emancipation that most people think about when we think about slavery was abolished was when President Lincoln decided to make his compromise with the Southern planters to say, hey man, we can stop this slavery thing, but you know, it was all about taxes and money, the tradition of having somebody beneath you. My dad told me a story one time, and he said that when he was young, that they had a man, a Black man that was able to, even in spite his condition as a sharecropper, to be able to make a way for his family. And he would plow the fields all day with his hands and his body. And he would go and he would sell the produce of the land that he was renting from his sharecropper mortgage landholder. And in spite of the fact that he was being cheated out of the money that he was still able to some kind of way procure a mule to help him plow the fields. This is in the 1940s. He's plowing the field and he's trying to make way for his family. And a white man and his son decided that they needed to do something about it. They lived about a mile up the road from him, but they couldn't get a mule no matter how hard they worked. So one night they snuck to this man's farm and they decided to kill his mule. When the son of the white man asked his father, Daddy, why did we kill the mule? He said, son, if you can't be better than the nigger, then who can you be better than? So a big part of the situation is about having a traditional hereditary position that puts you over somebody else. That's what white supremacy is all about. So after Lincoln's assassination, we get to a point where we're gonna have to make a compromise, because once the Blacks get free, they're gonna get out and about and start trying to do things and compete with good white people. And that competition could not be allowed in the regular workforce because the Africans or the Blacks had all the actual skills. They were the blacksmiths, they were the artisans, they were the construction workers, the builders, the carpenters, the cabinetry makers. They were the ones with the skills, because in slavery, everybody had a job. The white people couldn't compete at the time, so they needed a way to make sure that they could put these Black people in their place and keep them in their place into infinitum, hence the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution actually legalized slavery as long as you're duly convicted of a crime. So how do we get them duly convicted of a crime? This process is almost an ingenious, insidious form of genocide, where it's like a mind game. Everybody's like, okay, Emancipation Day just came. They just freed the slaves. In the same sense, in the same year, they adopted what we call the Black codes, the Black legal codes. They put laws together all across the country that made a different set of rules for Africans or Black people than they had for the dominant race, the exclusive race, the white race. These rules range from anything from looking a white person directly in the eyes, which was called reckless eyeballing. For reckless eyeballing, there was a $75 fine or 6 months on the prison farm, where these people could be leased out to work for plantations. So the only thing that really had to happen was a Black man walks down the street with his head down and a white man says, he looked me in the eye, so we're gonna put him in jail. $75 in 1865, 1869, 1890, or even right now, it's really a lot of money to be fined. I mean, think about it for a second. You get a ticket, you're coming up the street, you're jaywalking, you're driving fast or whatever, and the people charge you $75. You're mad because it affects your household budget, your income. But in those days, $75 was enough to cripple a family. So most of these men, although emancipated one day, have to now return to the condition of social death, which is slavery, which is allowed by the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. So, but it's worse right now. During slavery, the master had incentive to make sure that his property was well taken care of. You buy a car, you're not just gonna go drive it like a go-kart or a doogie. You're gonna wash it on the weekends, you're gonna maintenance it, you're gonna get new tires or whatever. Same thing with slavery. You buy a $500 Negro buck. You don't want to just, break him or something. You just spent $500. You want to get your money's worth out of him. You need a few seasons of crops to come to where he can work and pay for himself and make some type of profit in the end of this. But with the convict leasing system that came from the Black codes, there was no incentive to actually make the work something that the leasee or the convict, word slave gone because of the 13th Amendment. We changed that word now to convict, and we can work him from can't see in the morning to can't see at night till he dies. And as a matter of fact, a large segment of the population of Africans or Black people that went through the convict leasing program were destroyed within a year's time of doing work for whatever companies would do deals with the state or the local parish or county government that would lease these now government-owned slaves out to these private firms that needed this labor. This forced labor was something that no group of people can claim to be anything near humane. The people that administered the type of barbaric torture through labor that happened at this time were suffering from what was called, what psychologists now call cognitive dissonance. To feel like these things are less than human. It's almost like being able to stand on top of a spider or a roach and crush it. And you feel nothing because you have no connection with it. You don't feel like it's definitely like not human or a thing that has feelings or whatever. So you're able to do something really, really barbaric and consider yourself still a civil, sane person. Like right now, if I go get a puppy or something and put it in front of this camera and slam it on the desk, most of you would get on social media tomorrow and be like, wow, we need to get him in prison or do something. You would probably need psychological therapy as a result of what you saw. But men and women were able during this era of the United States They were able to watch Black men, women, and children suffer the highest levels of torture and suffering that any group or race of people that had ever experienced in recorded history. And this cognitive dissonance, this feeling that this thing is less than me, still exists to this very day. And that's why the timeline that our people with Decarcerate put together is so important. So we understand that from 1619 till now, nothing has really actually changed. The only thing that has changed are the titles and the labels. After the convict legal system, we had what was called Jim Crow segregation. And it legalized discrimination all across the United States of America based on color, based on race. And we had more lynchings during this time, more acts of barbarism during this time than we even had during slavery. There were almost 5,000 recorded lynchings during 1877 to 1965. These recorded lynchings where they took human beings, men, women, children, out and invited the whole town. And when I talk about the whole town, I'm talking about white people. The whole town would come out, men, women, and children. And there are pictures, historical documents show you them pointing into this, to the people that are hanging from these trees and laughing or smiling with their children in their arms, with children laughing and smiling. If we hung a cat right now, you wouldn't laugh or smile, but the effect that that had is traumatizing to generations that existed even after that time. So we think about it and we say, well, you know, that was back then, you understand? And this is now. How does that have anything to do with now? When I was a kid, my grandmother, and bless her soul, she died when she was 104 years old while I was in prison. She used to sit me on her lap and she would tell me remarkable stories about why I should fear white people, why I should make sure that I'm always humble around them and never show your teeth or your eyes and look down. She was actually terrified of Caucasian people, period. Even the good ones. She said that there were some good ones, but you have to be careful because they're mean. They're mean. And I used to like, Grandmama, I mean, I know white kids, they're cool with me. What do you mean? She said, baby, just don't sass them. Don't show them your intelligence. Don't just stay in your place, right? And I was like, Grandmama, come on now, that's back in your day. And she said, baby, nothing changes. The core of the thing is gonna always be that thing. And I was like, I was just dead set against being in fear of a group of people because I had nothing against them. I'm like, why would they hate me? That's historical, right, Mom? And she's like, baby, just be careful. So, okay, I started going through life, trying to better myself. I went to college, I went to the military, and then I decided to promote rap records in 1988, 1999. So we started bringing rap groups across the United States. And unbeknownst to me, I was viewed by law enforcement as a threat because we could organize 4,000 to 5,000 kids and put them in one building and there was not a single act of violence. At that time, I thought that I just was an emerging businessman. But the government viewed me as a potential political threat if I would ever wake up. And I was like, I mean, I don't know anything about that. So that's a part of why I was actually sent to prison for a crime that I didn't commit. And it took me maybe 10 years of incarceration and study and ultimately Freedom of Information Act to get my political records, the police reports, the FBI reports, to find out that the reason that we went to prison was because they were making sure that the people that Hillary Clinton referred to as super predators, or the people that Joe Biden referred to and Richard Nixon referred to as the typical criminals, would be incapacitated. That was the term that they used. So, and I hope some of you have researched and know a little bit about what went on during the civil rights movement, the type of tactics that law enforcement used to make sure that Blacks would continuously be marginalized and placed in a condition of perpetual servitude, or again, marginalization. We found out earlier today, the daughter of Malcolm X was actually gaining advantage on proving that the FBI and the New York Police Department actually was involved in the death of her father, Malcolm X. That is perfect present tense time now. So we used to have to read everything to find out what was going on, but now this generation can just Google it. So if you want to learn a little bit about what the government has been doing, did in the past, and continues to do, then Google it. And if Google doesn't give you what you need, find out what's happening through the Freedom of Information Act. That time during 1954 and 1968 saw the assassination of almost all of the most vibrant Black or African-American political leaders. We lost Medgar Evers. We lost Fred Hampton. We lost Martin Luther King. We lost Malcolm X, all to political assassination. And this was happening from the voices and the powers that be at the highest rung of American government. This has always been about making sure that white people continue to have an advantage against every other group in the United States of America. So most people ask, why do you guys just not go back to Africa? Why do you continue to want to be an American? And I can answer the question for me. It's about the promise. It's about knowing that the idea, even if the founding fathers didn't have Black people in mind when they built the Constitution of the United States is a beautiful idea. And if we make this promise real, this then could be the greatest country that ever existed in humankind. So we continue to work. Black people are spiritual by nature, so we don't seek vengeance, even though most other groups would say, hey, never forget, get them for that. That's not a part of our nature. Black and white are political constructs. Black is homogenous though. I have Caucasian friends that are Black. I have African friends that are actually more white than anything else. And I call them friends, but they're more associates, people that I know. And these political constructs or mental positions are political. So we talk Black and white, but we're not talking about race, because we, in this era, understand that that's a political construct, but that doesn't make it unreal. If you're in the skin that I'm in and police cars get behind you, you're more likely to get nervous than if you are a Caucasian person. And that's just the simple reality of America put together according to the timeline that we're showing you right now. And FBI, COINTELPRO, Operation, this, that, and the other, that were all designed to make sure that African-American youth are not militant Black Panthers, but something more like gangs or drug addicts, began in 1956. This was J. Edgar Hoover thinking that the biggest threat to American national security was the African American, or the Negro, as they call them at that time. And they waged war on these organizations, on these urban areas, the same way they would do against nation states. They broke us. They came through, they put us against each other. They killed, they disseminated false information, misinformation, and they made sure that we would not have enough stamina or leadership to sustain the type of guerrilla effort that it would have taken to actually make sure that our people were autonomous and self-sustainable. And hence the Get Tough on Crime and war on drug policies that took place in the 1970s all the way until the present day. When they said get tough on drugs or war against poverty, those are just euphemisms or dog whistle words for Black people. War has been waged on us. Ever since I was 9 years old, I was getting pulled over by police officers, made to lay flat face down in the street with my arms spread wide. And it made me understand that I was something of a second-class citizen in the United States of America. But not until I was actually convicted of a crime did I understand that we are slaves here in the United States of America, and we're looked upon as something less than, right? If what was happening to African Americans through the form of police brutality that has been happening all of my life and before my life started, to dogs, like if somebody just was out shooting dogs or the police done this to even dogs, the whole world would rise up against them and it wouldn't be happening the same way that it's happening. So we know that you cannot legislate goodwill. You can't change a law and make a person like you, right? But what we consider racism sometimes is only prejudice, right? So if you look at a person and you say, I don't like that person because he's white, or I don't like that person because he's Black, that's not racism, that's prejudice. Racism is a system. It's having the power to make your school books denigrate every other group of people except for the group that you belong to. It's the power to make you have to put on an application whether or not what race you are. It's the power to redline or decide who gets capital that's public capital in the form of loans based on what area you live in or what color your skin is. And that's what we're working to change. These policies, these systems that make sure that Black people are marginalized into infinitum have to be changed. When I came home from prison in 2016, I had the opportunity to work with a team of people that put resources together so that we could stop one of the most insidious legal practices in the United States of America, and that's called the Non-Unanimous Jury situation. When I was convicted of second-degree murder, I was convicted by 10 people. 2 people on my jury said that I don't believe there's enough evidence to convict him of this crime. But their votes didn't matter because a long time ago, and I'm gonna say it was 1898, a Confederate colonel by the name of Samuel James, who later bought the plantation called Angola, came to the Louisiana power brokers, their legislators, and said, I have a way that we can ensure white supremacy into the foreseeable future. He said that Black people only make up 30% of the state of Louisiana. If we decided through legislation that 9 good white jurors could decide the fate of anybody who came before a jury in the state of Louisiana, then we could make sure anybody could be convicted that was Black. Think about that for a second. The rule was 9-3 in 1898. Only state that ever done that was the state of Louisiana. Samuel James traveled to Oregon where they were having a problem with Jewish people. And he said, this is how we handled it in Louisiana. So the people in Oregon also paid him as a consultant to deal with that non-unanimous situation. The Black codes are developed after we have in constitutional law that 9 jurors can convict. Only in Louisiana. If you get arrested for the same crime in Texas, it takes 12. If you get arrested for the same crime in Mississippi, it takes 12. The gold standard of American justice is a unanimous jury. For the last 139 years, citizens in the state of Louisiana have been getting a substandard American judicial experience. No African-American vote has ever counted on a jury in the state of Louisiana in history until 2019. Think about that for a second. Everybody who ever voted in history, if you're African-American, your vote was nullified by the binary implementation of a non-unanimous jury system that allowed the state of Louisiana to become the lead incarcerator on the planet Earth. That's not the United States. I'm talking China, I'm talking Russia, I'm talking every government on the planet Earth. The state of Louisiana was able to become the lead incarcerator. They were able to keep the traditions alive to where these Black people stay in their place. You go to jail in the state of Louisiana and you're sentenced to life. You have a 97.5% chance of dying in prison. Life means death. Life is death by incarceration in the state of Louisiana. So we had to work really, really, really hard to get the non-unanimous verdict situation first out of committee, then on the floor, then in front of the people of the state of Louisiana. Remember, vote yes on 2, right? It was like, man, let's change this thing right here. But when we were going to funders, when we were talking to people, they were like, man, this has been a law forever. Nothing can change that. Nobody can change that. And I'm like, I don't believe in the 21st century that if people understood what this means, why it exists, that they won't change it. And right now, we're coming up on the same type of situation. Right now, we're going before the Louisiana legislature, both houses, the Senate and the House, which has a supermajority of Republicans, right? And we're gonna ask and we're gonna demand that slavery be abolished, that we take this, if slavery is bad, it's bad, right? If social death is bad, it's bad. I had a lady that came to me while I was in prison. She was from Woodville, Mississippi. She worked for the prison. She was a guard. And she said, literally, I want you to perform cunnilingus. I don't want to say the wrong word. I don't want to be nasty, right? Or I'm going to write you up. right? Write you up means that I can get some people to come make you go in the hole, get in trouble. I can hurt your life if you don't do this sexual act on me. This is my personal experience. Women aren't the only ones that are raped, by the way. And women aren't the only ones going through this type of trauma of being something less than, right? And when this happened to me, I was like, wow. First of all, if you wouldn't have asked me like that, we might have been able to do something because after all, I'm a man in prison. But because she asked me like that, I had to take a stance. I had to say no. I had to say, I'm not going to allow you to use the authority of your badge. And this is a Black woman, by the way. I'm not going to allow you to use the authority of your badge to denigrate me in any way, even though I understood at that time that I was a slave. And it boiled my blood. It made me study harder. It made me work harder. It made me say, wow, I've really fallen very, very far down a rabbit hole for this type of stuff to be able to be happening in modern day America. So once I got home, I wanted to do everything that I could to try to decarcerate, to try to lower the incentives for law enforcement to lock people up, not just in the state of Louisiana, but anywhere in the whole world. I want to be able to say, hey, this isn't about just punishment. This is about fixing our society. If incarcerating people make the world a safer place, how come Louisiana doesn't have the lowest crime rate if it has the highest incarceration rate? How come if we spend all of this money, the whole United States has a higher incarceration rate than any other state in any other country in the world, but we lock up more people. This doesn't work. The taxpayers aren't getting a fair exchange on the money that we're paying. I believe it's not in our best interest to continue to even have the attitude of vengeance. Of course, yeah, you're mad. If somebody breaks in my house and steals something, I'm gonna be mad. I'm gonna try to probably kill you or whatever, but that's an individual feeling. That shouldn't be the feeling of the sovereign. If America wants the highest standing in the United States, in the world, and they want the moral high ground, then we have to get in accord with the rest of the world. We're as a result of having slavery on our books, we're in violation of several international treaties. We're in violation of the UN Humanitarian Rights Council rules. We're in violation of just being good human beings, right? So it's hard to say we don't want human trafficking in the world, but at the same time, we're the biggest human trafficker as an organization in the world, right? So I know we're reaching our 10-minute point, and I want to be able to allow you guys to interact and to work with us. So before I open the table for discussions or questions, I want to say, remember that we're going to support Representative Edmund Jordan's bill. We don't have a bill number yet, but we will get it out to everybody. If you put your email in the chat box, I'll make sure that we get copies of the bill to you personally through your email. And we want to make sure that if you guys want to help, that you get with us at Decarcerate Louisiana and volunteer whatever you can, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's contacts and connections. We need help to actually get this thing done. It's costing us out of our pockets to get it done right now, but I think that God's gonna make a way, because if slavery is bad, it's bad. We're gonna make sure that it's eradicated. So now let's open up for questions. If you have a question, turn your camera on, put your hand up, and I'll call you. Anybody? Nobody's camera is on.
Everyone feel free to just raise your hand on Zoom if y'all know how to do that, or unmute yourselves. And ask as you please. I guess just make sure to be respectful of one another.
Hello?
Hello, Kurt. This is
Okay,
Belinda.
all right, let's start with Melissa, and Dennis Knowles is next. Who is Melissa?
Belinda Parker Brown, Curtis.
Oh, I'm sorry, Belinda. All right.
Hey, Curtis. I love
All
you,
right.
buddy. I appreciate you so much for doing this. Wow. I love the way you're breaking it down, and it's so important. But can you, I want you to go back to the horse. You said that they killed the horse. How can you relate that to where we're at in the world today?
When you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The white man felt bad because the black man had something that he didn't have. And in the United States, we're a capitalist economy. We judge success based on things. Like, so if you have a Lexus, you have the Mercedes-Benz, a police officer that makes $40,000 a year might look at a rapper who makes $40 million a year and say, man, you're running around here with all this stuff on you. And it's a more incentive to hurt you, because I don't feel successful anymore, even though I might be successful with my $40,000 a year and being a good father and having, providing for my kids and so forth. So that's what that story is really about. If you can't be better than a nigger, then who can you be better than? That's the lost cause. That's why we fight for the Confederate monuments and so forth and so on. We want to keep the tradition, hereditary position of white people above all others. Dennis?
Brother Curtis, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you very much. I mean, because I can identify, I've never been incarcerated that way, but I know so many people. I'm in the state of Michigan, and I'm also with the LUI as well down there in Louisiana. How then best do we derive, because it seems like we're always begging and getting nowhere for some legislation to do for us that it's not doing. People, I'll make this real short, people are being incarcerated, as you well know. You said the 10-2 law, well, we have the 3-peat law here in the state of Michigan as well. How do we then, with the racist system that we live in, this white supremacy that is still existing, how far can we go? We can't do it without state reps. It's not working. We get some washed over, watered down promises, even at the federal level. What do we really need to do then as a force of one to make ourselves become free from this demon, this beast?
All right, Brother Dennis, a great question. And I used to talk to my folks in prison, and Nelson Taylor, I see you on here. That's one of my young brothers that was in prison when we were having these conversations. And it was like, man, what can we do? I mean, first of all, we had to understand that no other person, man, woman, can give you freedom, first of all. So we're gonna understand that the ability to move around and go places and have fun or whatever, that's liberty. Freedom is something else. Freedom is the reason that Black people had to be dismissed of their culture, dismissed of their God, dismissed of their language. Because if you have your language, your culture, and your God, you still can access freedom. Freedom is the ability to think outside of your astral situation. Freedom is the ability to decide for yourself what you want to be, what you want to do, how high you want to climb, right? If you are a slave and they decide that, okay, you're gonna be a tractor driver, and the only thing you can ever do is be a tractor driver, that doesn't mean that you can't be free, though. Freedom is a mental thing, it's a spiritual thing, and it allows you to overcome any type of actual physical constraint. So to answer your question, we decide right now, and we're going to demonstrate it to you, that there is no longer going to be slavery legalized in the state of Louisiana by August of this year. We make the manifest be and it is type of statement. Then we understand strategically that politics is a blood sport, right? Politics, in my definition, is the art of forwarding your own agenda, right? So we decide what we want. We don't just ask for what we want, though. We understand that we are about to actually war for what we want. Decarcerate Louisiana does demonstrations. We do direct actions. We will actually knock your server off course by having 15 to 30 people just all day email your your website from different places, or call your phones and make sure that no other business can be done here because your phone won't operate for the next 24 hours till you realize that we need to be heard, that we're going to get this to happen, and we will make sure that the job that you love so much, because politicians are just politicians, they want their job. Once they realize that enough people have a consensus on a thing and we deal with them, then we're able to leverage our base. So we're base building right now, right? We decide strategically what we're gonna do. Remember though, that we're not just compromising like this is not a negotiation. Slavery is bad, we want it to be bad. If it's not bad, then we're gonna start doing things that make it hurt within legal perimeter. But it is a blood sport. So that's the thing. It's about who has the will to do what needs to be done, Brother Dennis. Anybody else with a question?
Looks like we might have time for one more. So anyone here from LSU especially, I'd encourage y'all to take advantage.
Wow, I may have done a pretty good job then, or it might have been boring. But either way, know that we have a lot of work to do. Thank you guys for allowing Decarcerate Louisiana to show you a vision of a world where everything is not just punitive. We want to treat crime as a social disease. We want to have the ability to leave our houses unlocked again. We want to decide that we can control our own destinies, and that as long as we homogenize our relationships and not think of ourselves exclusively as the one, that we can have a better world. Peace, I love you, and good night.
Great, thank you.